Okay, hi YouTube, Mr. Boss here, and this video I'm going to be talking about how the PlayStation Vita is comparing to phones and tablets in sort of 2015 and beyond. So you know that the PlayStation Vita, when it was released back in 2011, it actually had a quad-core A9 processor which was actually clocked at up to 2 GHz. So considering that, this is an absolute beast. I mean, when the actual specifications were revealed, people were literally, their jaws just dropped. This was at the time the most powerful mobile device ever created, in the sort of handheld section, excluding laptops and that kind of thing. So yes, this is a really powerful portable console still. However, mobile phones, tablets, they're increasing by power like 50%, 70%, double every single year, and it's obviously creating some exponential growth. And so, can the PlayStation Vita keep up in a day and age where those devices are getting so much more capable? Well, this video I'm just going to talk about my opinions on the subject, and obviously I'd love to hear what you guys think as well in the comments below, but this is just what I think. So I also own an LG G3. This is obviously a 2014 flagship phone, and it is several times more powerful than the PlayStation Vita. It has the Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 processor and 2 gigs of RAM, which is about 4 times that of the Vita. And obviously the Cortex A15 structure of the Snapdragon 801 is a lot more efficient than the Cortex A9 used in the Vita. And so not only does this give a lot more power, but it also gives much better efficiency, meaning longer battery life and all sorts of other benefits. Now, even though the PlayStation Vita is a very optimized sort of ecosystem, it still only has 512 megabytes of RAM, and all things considered, this is not a lot, considering it has a fairly complex operating system. It's opened up availability for multitasking, and yeah, so 512 megabytes becomes pretty limiting, with about 200 of that being used for other things apart from the game. So yeah, if you take into account that most Android phones now have 2 gigabytes, some even have 3, and I think by next year 4 gigabytes will be the standard, the PlayStation Vita is looking fairly limited. I mean, clearly it's unfair to compare to its PlayStation 4 counterpart, but with that thing packing 8 gigabytes, it's starting to look a little bit diminutive. Now I think literally probably the biggest problem with the PlayStation Vita is that it was released at the wrong time. I think that as a PlayStation 3 accessory, if this was released alongside the PlayStation 3, I know that would have been very difficult considering the technology then, but if they'd released a similar powered console to the PlayStation 3 when the PlayStation 3 was in full force, then I think the console would have done really well. I think it would have got a lot more of the ports of major games and done pretty much exactly what people wanted it to do, which is to play those console games on the go. However, because it came so late in the console's life cycle, and because it didn't really fully integrate with the PlayStation 3, because obviously Sony intended it to integrate with the PlayStation 4, then I think that the power difference between those two consoles has stopped that from happening. For example, a PlayStation 4 exclusive, something like Knack, although it wasn't a great game, but this is just an example, they just cannot port that game over to PlayStation Vita from PlayStation 4 just because of the huge difference in power. So I mean, if they actually managed to release a new console, maybe not the PlayStation Vita or anything quite like it, but some sort of handheld console which could keep parity with the PlayStation 4. And I mean, this is not actually that unreasonable. I mean, if Sony right now released a handheld console that could do this, I think that would actually be quite a fair thing to do. And this is actually quite possible. I mean, you think, how can a handheld console have the same power as the PlayStation 4? Well, it doesn't really have to. I mean, for example, the PlayStation Vita is only pushing a resolution of 960 by 540. That's only a quarter of the pixels that the PlayStation 4 has to push. So even if in the next-gen counterpart of the PlayStation Vita they had a similar sort of screen, that's going to save a lot of processing power. It means that, you literally only need maybe half the processing power to get the same quality image. On top of that, if it's a smaller screen, smaller details are going to be much less obvious, and so it's actually much easier to get away with sort of taking away some of the finer things. And so you'll still get an awesome looking picture, great graphics, smooth gameplay, but just with some of the extras taken out, which are just not necessary. And which means you could play full games like Call of Duty Advanced Warfare on your PlayStation Vita, and that's exactly what people want. So clearly the PlayStation Vita is rapidly falling behind phones and tablets in terms of power. I mean, if you consider it to phones in 2 or 3 years' time, I mean, the specs will literally just be laughable. However, I mean, you have to consider how many games have I actually played on my phone? Well, in the last 2 months, none. There's been not one single game that I've invested myself into, really gotten, stuck into the game and the way it works, and spent a good amount of time actually sort of reaping the benefits of spending time in it. Whereas the PlayStation Vita, 4 or 5, I've been really enjoying Tearaway, I've been really enjoying Child of Light, I've been loving Freedom Wars. I mean, there's actually a lot here, and even though these aren't, constantly being released, even though there's not a flurry of high-end titles, the backlog is quite surprising. And I think it needs to be considered that even though phones today have multiple times as much power as a PlayStation Vita, games like Tearaway just aren't seen on those platforms, and to be honest, this is still one of the best looking mobile games I've ever seen. I can't actually think of very many games at all which I'd say look better than this, let alone on Android, where games are full of in-app purchases, full of advertising and all sorts of other really annoying and off-putting models that prevent you from really experiencing the game to its fullest. So yeah, I think the PlayStation Vita is pretty much done for. I think it's faded into the background so much that no game or AAA title or anything like that can really save this thing. However, I don't think it's too late for Sony. I think that they could actually take one more venture into the handheld category and really learn from all their mistakes, get rid of all the gimmicks and just create a handheld that can keep parity with the PlayStation 4. And that is not unreasonable. It can be thicker, it can be heavier, I don't mind at all. But if it can play PlayStation 4 games on the go, then they have nailed it, and that's what I think they need to do. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for more.